Alright, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the gold coins of Kumaragupta the First. Why and when this object was created. The object was created in 1415. It was created for Kumaragupta the First. Gupta the First, my bad. Ruled from 1450 to 1455. So this was created in the first year of his rule. This has a big, the part that plays the biggest is like this object was created to basically reaffirm, or at least affirm, the legitimacy and supremacy of the current king. So, and it was to commemorate the ritual that was basically kind of like either the king's ordained, and like he would do it again at one point. I know Kumaragupta did it twice in his life. This tool was also used. This was an object used to affirm the status of the king as a ruler that was ordained by the gods over the land. This is kind of not where you would say the god being involved in money and currency and things like that starts, but it's probably one of the bigger reasons why we have that on there. You can see this everywhere. You can see this from our own money, Britain's, all throughout history. You can see it just everywhere. The coins were actually based off the Kushan Empire's models for the coin. That gives this next one. The ritual. The ritual consisted of a stallion being purified and then set free for a whole year. I don't know how the stallion was purified. I tried finding it, couldn't find it. But there were thousands of attendants to this horse, just to make sure the horse didn't mate, to keep the horse pure for the sacrifice. After a year, the horse was sacrificed in front of a huge crowd by the king himself with a golden dagger. And just to emphasize, this ritual was very expensive. As I said, the Kumaragupta did it only like twice in his life. Twice in his reign. The ritual is a pre-Hindu ritual. So Hindus might have not looked on that ritual fondly, even though the ritual was done in the name of Kumaragupta, which is Kumaragupta's the first. Basically like his favorite god, I would guess, or like his god he thinks he favors him. This leads to our next one. The status symbols on the Silk Road. Status symbols were everywhere on the Silk Road. Everywhere you looked. You could say they almost built the Silk Road at times. Silk itself is a status symbol. Heavily a status symbol throughout history. You could see this in almost every empire during this time. Romans were the earliest. In Liu's book, it mentions that the Romans were using silk to denote women of very high class. And even men wore silk of high class. And you could see this everywhere. They even sold silk back to each other to like reinforce their, like, with their own brand on it, to reinforce their own empire's status. Like, say, the Persians and the Kushan Empire embroidering certain patterns on their silks as their own brand. This was taken to extreme later by the Byzantine Empire when they created supplementary laws to prevent anyone but imperial rulers from wearing purple silk, as purple silk was basically the symbol for imperial rulers to the Byzantines, and the Byzantines had a very, very tight control on purple silk, or even silk in general in their area, by undercutting any merchants outside of the Byzantine Empire to transporting goods through the Byzantine Empire. So the Byzantine Empire was basically making money hand over fist on that purple silk. This helped the Byzantine Empire a ton. And the next thing I want to talk about is the Gupta Empire on the Silk Road. The Gupta Empire was created in 320 AD when Chandragupta, I'm sorry if I butchered that one, the first, ascended to the throne. He ascended through the throne with, I'm going to butcher this name pretty badly too, I'm not going to lie, Kumadrivel. Like, he basically married Kumadrivel, who was a person who was a princess who was very popular with the Buddhist population, and this is what got his first foothold in, because this was when Hinduism was starting to take effect, but not as much as Buddhism was. But over the course of the Gupta's rule, Hinduism became kind of the primary religion of India. The Gupta Empire was also one of the largest, after, a couple years, like a couple rulers. The Gupta Empire is one of the largest superpowers on the Silk Road. The only other superpowers on the Silk Road at the time that were as big was the Byzantine Empire and, I would say, China. The Chinese, because they made a lot of silk, and the Byzantines, because they basically had control of the silk trade at the time, even though we could say China was also big because they had a lot more other things they could do. And the Gupta Empire was the other superpower because just how many people, goods had to go through there. The Guptas were also very tolerant of other religions and wholeheartedly accepted them, even though they cared, they cared more about Hinduism than the other one. Most of their coins were issued for Vishnu, but there is coins that are issued for Muslims and Buddhist, my bad. One thing that I found interesting was when I mentioned the coins models being based off the Kurdish Empire. That's probably at least a little bit because much of the territories from the Kushan Empire were taken over by the Guptas. So the Guptas were basically taking over parts of the Kushan Empire. They probably saw these coins and thought that was a good idea. What is the place of this object on the Silk Road? The place of this object on the Silk Road was to confirm the status of the king. Basically, it was confirm the status of the king so that basically everyone knew that he was the true ruler of the land and that no other person was ruling at the time or could rule. It was done twice for this reason, just to reaffirm and to basically tell everybody, hey, this is my land. It was also, and I would say this coin was probably more effective than, say, most of the other things of the other status objects like Four Kings on the Silk Road. Because you could think about statues and things of that nature. But statues and monuments in mosque states in place. So not everyone can view them. But if your currency, or even some of your currency, has your face on it, everyone gets to see you. So everyone knows. Another thing this item exemplifies on the Silk Road is the use of status items on the Silk Road to establish class. This is a very, very important theme throughout the entirety of the history of the Silk Road, even. You can see this in basically everything from the Silk Road, to silks, iron, horses, even tools and weapons. The transcontinental exchange was mostly the ecological, not ecological. The transcultural exchange was done by wealthy people, probably more than it was done by less than wealthy people. Just due to the fact that the more luxury goods they had, the rich demanded more luxury goods. that were from different places of the world. You could say those even came to a point where countries are creating their own brands and their own status symbols for their country and selling it back to the other countries. And that is my presentation. Have a good night, guys.